240. Zuoguando's imprisonment and martyrdom. During the late reign of Emperor Shenzong of Ming, Wanli Emperor, an official named Gu Xianqing was dismissed from office for his outspoken criticism of the imperial government. Returning to his hometown of Wuxi, Jiangsu, he gathered a group of like-minded scholars and began teaching at the Donglin Academy. Gu Xianqing frequently criticized corrupt officials in his lectures, and his ideas quickly gained traction among scholars and officials in Beijing. However, the powerful bureaucrats he condemned began to resent him, labeling him and his followers as members of the Donglin Party, Donglin Dang. When Emperor Shizong, Tianqi Emperor, ascended the throne, several Donglin supporters came to power, including two of the most respected officials, Yan Lian and Zuoguando. Zuoguando's encounter with Shirkufa. One winter day, while stationed near Beijing for an imperial examination, Zuoguando decided to go for a horseback ride in the countryside despite the heavy snowfall. While exploring, he came across an ancient monastery and decided to rest inside. As he entered, he noticed a young scholar asleep at a desk, with several manuscripts spread out before him. Curious, Zuo picked up one of the writings and was impressed by the elegant calligraphy and refined literary style. As he prepared to leave, he noticed that the young scholar was dressed in thin, worn-out clothing, unsuited for the bitter cold. Without hesitation, Zuo removed his mink fur cloak and gently placed it over the sleeping scholar before quietly exiting the room. Afterward, he asked the monk about the young man's identity and learned that his name was Shirkufa, a scholar who had recently arrived in Beijing for the imperial examinations. Zuoguando remembered the name. When the exam day arrived, Zuo, acting as an examiner, paid close attention when the name Shirkufa was announced. Recognizing the young man from the monastery, he carefully reviewed his exam and awarded him first place. After the examination, Zuoguando invited Shirkufa to his residence, praising his intelligence and diligence. He introduced him to his wife, saying, "None of my own sons have the talent to carry on my legacy. I will rely on this young man instead." From that day on, Shirkufa became Zuoguando's protege. Zuo even offered him lodging in his home and personally mentored him in scholarship and state affairs. Their relationship was so close that, even late at night after finishing official work, Zuo would often visit Shirkufa's room to discuss politics and philosophy. The struggle against Wei Zhongxian. Zuoguando and Yang Lian were deeply committed to reforming the corrupt government. However, Emperor Shizong was weak and easily manipulated. He placed his trust in the infamous eunuch Wei Zhongxian, who controlled the Eastern Depot, the imperial secret police. With unchecked power, Wei Zhongxian sold government positions, eliminated political rivals, and amassed immense wealth. Many corrupt officials allied themselves with him, forming a faction known as the Eunuch Party, Yin Dang. Enraged by their misconduct, Yang Lian courageously submitted a memorial to the emperor, listing 24 serious crimes committed by Wei Zhongxian. Zuoguando fully supported him, making it clear that they would not tolerate the eunuch's corruption. This move infuriated Wei Zhongxian and his allies. In 1625, they retaliated by accusing Yang Lian, Zuoguando, and other Donglin Party officials of treason. They fabricated crimes against them and had them thrown into prison, where they were subjected to brutal torture. Shirkufa's desperate efforts. When Zuoguando was imprisoned, Shirkufa was devastated. He spent days wandering outside the prison gates, searching for a way to see his teacher. However, the eunuch party ensured that Zuo was closely guarded, allowing no visitors. Inside the prison, Zuoguando was relentlessly tortured. Despite severe beatings and threats, he refused to confess to false charges. Desperate, Shirkufa bribed the guards with 50 taels of silver, begging to see his mentor one last time. Moved by his sincerity, one of the guards secretly arranged a meeting. A secret meeting in prison. That night, Shirkufa disguised himself as a night soil collector, dressing in ragged clothes and straw sandals, carrying a bamboo basket and long shovel. Led by a sympathetic guard, he slipped into the prison. When he found Zuoguando's cell, he was shocked by what he saw. Zuo sat huddled in a corner, his body covered in wounds and bruises. His face was burned beyond recognition. His left leg had rotted so severely that the bone was exposed. Overcome with grief, Shirkuff knelt before Zhuo and wept uncontrollably. Zhuo, despite his injuries, recognized his disciple's sobs. Struggling to open his swollen eyes, he glared at Shirkuff with fiery determination and shouted angrily, "Fool! Do you know where you are? Why did you come here? The country is in ruins, and my fate is sealed. But you still have a future. If you get caught, who will continue the fight?" Shirkuff could not stop crying, but Zhuo Guangdou grew furious. "If you do not leave now, I will kill you myself and spare the traitors the trouble." Saying this, he grabbed his heavy shackles, raising them as if he would strike Shirkuff. Shirkuff, realizing his teacher's intent, silently bowed and withdrew, his heart breaking. Zhuo Guangdou's death. A few days later, Wei Zhongxian ordered the execution of Zhuo Guangdou, Yan Lian, and their allies. Shirkuff, despite the risks, bribed the guards again to retrieve Zhuo Guangdou's body and give him a proper burial. Whenever Shirkuff recalled that fateful night in prison, he could not hold back his tears, saying, "My teacher's heart was truly made of iron and stone." Legacy. Zhuo Guangdou's unwavering righteousness and sacrifice became legendary. Although the Donglin Party was temporarily crushed, their ideals of integrity and resistance against corruption continued to inspire later generations. Shirkuff, following his teacher's example, later became a heroic commander who fought bravely in the final years of the Ming Dynasty, sacrificing his life to defend Yangzhou from the Qing invasion. 241. The Five Martyrs' Tomb. After Wei Zhongxian had Yan Lian and Zhuo Guangdou killed, he seized full control of the imperial court. He promoted officials and followers who flattered him, placing them in key government positions. Some of these individuals devised strategies for him, while others engaged in espionage and assassinations. The public gave them nicknames such as the 5 Tigers, 5 Leopards, 10 Dogs, 10 Children, and 40 Grandsons. Wei Zhongxian's power became unparalleled. Officials at all levels, both in the central government and local administrations, had to curry favor with him to keep their positions. When he traveled, his entourage was as grand as that of the emperor himself, and people treated him as though he were the ruler. In feudal times, the emperor was addressed as Wansui, 10,000 years. Since Wei Zhongxian was not the emperor, he could not be called Wansui. Instead, an official flattered him by addressing him as Juqiansui, 9,000 years. Pleased by this, Wei Zhongxian rewarded the official handsomely. From then on, he was widely known as 9,000 years. To further ingratiate himself with Wei Zhongxian, the governor of Zhujiang even built a temple in his honor. Temples were typically erected to commemorate deceased figures, but Wei Zhongxian was still alive, so this was called a living temple. When objections arose, Wei Zhongxian dismissed those who opposed him. Fearing his wrath, local officials across the country began constructing living temples for him. At that time, the imperial court was filled with eunuch factions and their supporters. Anyone with a sense of justice refused to associate with them and chose to resign. One such official, Zhou Shunqiang, disgusted by the eunuch faction's dominance, took an extended leave and retired to Suzhou. In 1626, Wei Zhongxian launched another large-scale crackdown on the Donglin Party. When soldiers escorted a captured Donglin official through Suzhou, Zhou Shunqiang hosted a farewell banquet for him. During the banquet, he openly cursed Wei Zhongxian by name. The escorting soldiers reported this to Wei Zhongxian, who was furious. He immediately ordered the Eastern Depot to dispatch troops, led by Nanjing Governor Mao Yilu, to Suzhou to arrest Zhou Shunqiang. News of the Eastern Depot's arrival to arrest Zhou Shunqiang spread quickly, stirring outrage among Suzhou's citizens. Over 20 years earlier, under the leadership of Guxian, the people of Suzhou had resisted tax officials. Now, with Wei Zhongxian's agents coming to seize another man of integrity, the city erupted in anger. The people sympathized with Zhou Shunqiang and viewed him as a hero for standing against the eunuch faction. On the day the Eastern Depot troops arrived, thousands of Suzhou citizens flooded the streets to support Zhou Shunqiang. They surrounded Mao Yilu's sedan chair and sent a group of scholars to petition for the withdrawal of the arrest order. Faced with an overwhelming crowd, Mao Yilu broke into a cold sweat, unable to utter a word. His soldiers, growing impatient, threw their iron shackles to the ground with a loud clang and shouted, "We are from the Eastern Depot. Who dares to stop us?" The sound of the iron shackles enraged the citizens. One person stepped forward and challenged the soldiers, saying, "Didn't you claim to be acting under the emperor's decree? Turns out this is just an Eastern Depot scheme." Before the soldiers could respond, the crowd roared in unison, "So you're just Eastern Depot lackeys." Enraged, the people charged toward Mao Yilu and his men, their voices as deafening as a landslide. The once arrogant soldiers panicked, scattering in all directions in an attempt to escape the mob. The furious citizens caught up with them and began beating them mercilessly. One soldier was struck in the chest, collapsed to the ground, rolled over a few times, and died. The remaining soldiers, bloodied and battered, fled for their lives. The crowd then turned their fury toward Mao Yilu, determined to hold him accountable. However, Mao Yilu, sensing the danger, had already slipped out of his sedan chair. Taking advantage of the chaos, he removed his official robes and escaped through a narrow alley. Desperate to hide, he stumbled upon a foul-smelling cesspit and, disregarding his dignity, concealed himself in a corner of the filthy hole. Only after the citizens had dispersed did his attendants retrieve him, unconscious from fear. The Eastern Depot agents who escaped reported back to Wei Zhongxian, who was enraged. He ordered Mao Yilu to send troops to suppress the uprising. The authorities arrested 5 individuals who had led the resistance: Yin Peiwei, Yang Yanru, Ma Jie, Xing Yang, and Zhou Wenyuan, and falsely accused them of inciting rebellion. They were sentenced to death. On the day of their execution, the 5 men remained fearless, openly cursing Wei Zhongxian and Mao Yilu as they faced their deaths. After their execution, the local people collected funds to retrieve their bodies from the executioners and buried them on the eastern side of Tiger Hill, in the Shantang area. Later, a tombstone was erected at the site, inscribed with the words, "The Tomb of 5 Martyrs." Although this uprising was ultimately suppressed, the event demonstrated the strength of the people. From that point forward, the Eastern Depot agents no longer dared to recklessly arrest individuals in different regions. 242. Yuan Chonghuan's Great Battle at Ningyuan. While Wei Zhongxian's eunuch faction was throwing the Ming dynasty's government into chaos, the Great Khan of later Jin, Nurhaci, was relentlessly attacking Ming forces in Liaodong. After the disastrous Battle of Saru, the Ming court sent an experienced general, Xiong Tingbai, beyond the Great Wall to command the defense of Liaodong. Xiong Tingbai was highly capable, but Wang Huazhen, the governor of Guangning, modern-day Beijing, Liaoning, saw Xiong's deployment as a threat to his own authority and did everything he could to obstruct Xiong's command. In 1622, Nurhaci launched an attack on Guangning, and Wang Huazhen, instead of organizing a defense, was the first to flee inside the Great Wall. Left with no choice, Xiong Tingbai protected as many civilians as possible and withdrew to Shanhai Pass. With Guangning lost, the Ming court, failing to differentiate blame, imprisoned both Xiong Tingbai and Wang Huazhen. Wei Zhongxian seized the opportunity to extort Xiong Tingbai, demanding 40,000 taels of silver in exchange for his life. However, Xiong was an upright man and had no such wealth, so he refused. The eunuch faction then fabricated charges of embezzling military funds against him and had him executed. With Xiong Tingbai gone, the Ming court was at a loss for who could lead the resistance against the later Jin. Meanwhile, a junior official, Yuan Chonghuan, mysteriously disappeared from the Ministry of War. When his colleagues searched for him at home, even his family had no idea where he had gone. A few days later, Yuan Chonghuan returned. He had ridden alone beyond the Great Wall to personally inspect the situation at Shanhai Pass. After carefully studying the conditions inside and outside the pass, Yuan Chonghuan returned to report to the Minister of War, Sun Qingzong. He declared, "As long as I have troops and supplies, I can hold Liaodong." Some court officials, terrified by the relentless later Jin offensives, were relieved to see Yuan volunteering for the task and agreed to let him try. The Tianqi emperor approved his request, granting him 200,000 taels of silver and appointing him to oversee the defense of the outlying regions. After years of war, the lands beyond the Great Wall were desolate, littered with the corpses of fallen soldiers. The harsh winter landscape was overrun with wild beasts, making survival difficult. Upon arriving beyond the pass, Yuan Chonghuan, accompanied by only a few soldiers, rode through the barren wilderness overnight and reached the forward base of Ningyuan, modern-day Xingqiang, Liaoning, before dawn. There, he gathered refugees and began fortifying the defenses. The soldiers stationed in the region were in awe of his courage and determination. Following an extensive survey, Yuan resolved to station troops in Ningyuan and build fortifications there. He reported his plan to the court, quickly gaining Sun Xingzong's support. At Ningyuan, Yuan oversaw the construction of a city wall 32 feet high and 20 feet wide, equipping it with various firearms and cannons. Sun Xingzong also stationed additional troops in nearby strongholds such as Jianzhou and Songshan to provide reinforcements if needed. Yuan Chonghuan's strict discipline earned him the respect and admiration of both the military and the civilian population. Merchants, hearing of Ningyuan's strong defenses, flocked to the town from all directions. The crisis in Liaodong was beginning to turn in the Ming dynasty's favor. However, just as Sun Xingzong and Yuan Chonghuan were making progress in stabilizing the region, they became the target of Wei Zhongxian's jealousy. Wei incited his faction to slander Sun Xingzong, forcing him out of office. With Sun gone, Wei Zhongxian appointed his ally, Gao Di, to command Ming military operations in Liaodong. Gao Di was an incompetent and cowardly officer. Upon arriving at Shanhai Pass, he convened a meeting with the generals, declaring that the later Jin forces were too strong and that defending the outer regions was impossible. He ordered all Ming troops stationed outside the pass to withdraw behind Shanhai Pass. Yuan Chonghuan firmly opposed the retreat, stating, "We have fought hard to establish our presence beyond the pass. We cannot give it up so easily." Gao Di insisted on abandoning Ningyuan. Outraged, Yuan retorted, "My duty is to defend Ningyuan. If I must die, I will die there, I will never retreat." Unable to sway Yuan, Gao Di reluctantly allowed him to remain at Ningyuan with a portion of his troops. However, he ordered all other Ming forces outside the pass to withdraw immediately. This sudden and poorly coordinated retreat left the frontier defenses in disarray, and in their haste, the troops abandoned over 100,000 bushels of stored grain. Seeing the Ming army retreating in chaos, Nurhaci believed the Ming dynasty was weak and vulnerable. In 1626, he personally led an army of 130,000 across the Liao River to attack Ningyuan. At this point, Ningyuan's surrounding strongholds had already been abandoned, leaving the city isolated with only 10,000 soldiers inside. Despite their precarious position, Yuan Chonghuan did not despair. He pricked his finger and wrote a blood oath pledging to fight to the death against the later Jin, showing it to his troops. He then delivered an impassioned speech, inspiring the soldiers to fight alongside him. Moved by his determination, the troops vowed to defend Ningyuan to the last man. Yuan ordered all civilians to bring their supplies and retreat within the city walls. To deny the enemy shelter and provisions, he burned all houses outside the city. He then assigned tasks to city officials, ensuring military supplies were secured and traitors were rooted out. He also sent a stern message to the commander at Shanhai Pass, instructing him to execute any officers who abandoned their posts and fled. With these measures in place, the morale in Ningyuan steadied, and everyone's sole focus became defending the city. After 20 days, Nurhaci's army arrived at Ningyuan in full force. The later Jin soldiers, protected by large shields, braved Ming arrows and cannon fire as they stormed the city walls. Though the Ming soldiers fought valiantly, the waves of attacking Jin troops seemed endless. At this critical moment, Yuan Chonghuan ordered his artillery to unleash its full power. The cannons roared, sending bursts of fire and shrapnel into the enemy ranks. The later Jin soldiers were blown apart, and those who survived were forced to retreat. The next day, Nurhaci personally led a renewed assault, deploying his strongest forces. Yuan Chonghuan, watching from the city's watchtower, calmly observed the enemy's movements. He waited until the later Jin forces were densely packed near the walls before commanding his artillery to fire. The devastating cannon barrage inflicted massive casualties on the attacking force. Even Nurhaci, who was overseeing the battle from behind, was seriously wounded. With no choice, he ordered his troops to retreat. Sensing an opportunity, Yuan Chonghuan led his troops in a counterattack, pursuing the retreating Jin army for 30 miles before returning victorious to Ningyuan. Mortally wounded, Nurhaci returned to Shenyang and lamented to his generals, "Since I was 25 years old, I have never lost a battle or failed to capture a city. I never imagined that such a small city as Ningyuan would prove unconquerable." Weakened by his wounds and frustration, he succumbed to his injuries a few days later. His eighth son, Hong Taiji, succeeded him as the great Khan of later Jin.